Welcome to Individual Learning Preferences, Module 3.2. These are the 9 objectives for this section. 1 will list the 4 elements of Ned Herman's brain-based approach and will briefly explain each. We'll then look at intake methods and why it's important for trainers to understand them, followed by looking at Howard Gardner's 10 multiple intelligences. After that, the section will explore perceptual modalities to learning and look at the 7 preferred learning modes, followed by looking at Patricia Cross's model to adult learning, and within that model, exploring the characteristics of adult learners and the chain of response. Accelerated learning is also explored in this module. In here, we will look at the purpose of accelerated learning and 3 principles of it, followed by looking at 2 factors that may affect the speed at which adults learn. Lastly, this section will take into consideration 2 considerations for identifying presentation style. The learning style neuromyth really deals with models and instruments of learning styles being discredited. And what we have found is that more than 70 models of learning styles exist. However, many that we would widely assume are quality learning styles are being discredited. Things like VAC, Kolb's, and the NLP. Each of these studies state that there's really no evidence or validity in learning styles. But what we do understand is that people learn in many different ways, and there's many different modalities of learning. Participants learn in a number of methods, and they use different methods to facilitate learning and different preferences. And when delivering training, we strive to create a variety of approaches that use the techniques and activities to suit all learning preferences. Herman's brain dominance model really looks at a whole brain-based approach. And within here, we understand how people learn in terms of their preference for thinking in 4 modes based on brain functions, with the left cerebral being logical, analytical, quantitative, and factual, and the right cerebral being visual, holistic, and creative. The left brain limbic is sequential, organized, planned, detailed, and structured, and the right brain limbic is emotional, interpersonal, sensory, kinesthetic, and symbolic. Where intake and learning styles reflect how people prefer to receive information, there is not as much on how people process information. And when we see multiple intelligences, we're looking at how people process information. Howard Gardner, who really started looking at this first, looked at intelligence as being a multifaceted and not fixed concept. And within there, he defines intelligence as having measurable aptitude, aptitudes people use to create to solve problems, and aptitude valued by culture. Howard Gardner in the 1983 book really describes multiple intelligence theory and gives you an initial list of those intelligences. But again, the biggest thing is learning style is the intake and intelligence is how we process. In terms of perceptual modalities, we can see how people go about learning. And according to James and Galbraith, a learner's primary perceptual modality and their attendant preferred mode of learning may be print, visual, aural, interactive, tactile, kinesthetic, or olfactory. But what we know with this is that most adults, or more adults, are visual learners than any other style. However, the critical part to this is that we take all of those multisensories into consideration when we are providing instruction or training. Patricia Cross developed in 1981 a way of looking at adult learning. And in there, she synthesized much of the available information on adult learning and really looked at 2 areas. One, a chain of response, which really looks at the motivation to participate is a result in perceptions, whether they're positive or negative. Certain personality types don't like learning because of low self-esteem. There's congruence exists between participation and anticipated learning outcomes. Higher order needs for achievement and self-actualization can't be fulfilled until lower needs for security and safety are met. Expectations of rewards are important to motivation. And then the characteristics of adult learners, and really in there, what she does is she looks at, the adult learners are different than children, and you have andragogy versus pedagogy, and then she goes through and looks at those different characteristics and how they relate to the strategies that you would use to teach them best. Accelerated learning principles and techniques really are a method for speeding up and enhancing the design of learning and the actual learning process. And what we want to do here is maximize the learner's long-term retention by honoring different learning preferences of each and using experiential learning exercises such as role-playing, mnemonics, props, and music. So when you're talking about accelerated learning, it really stresses that the environment is arranged in certain ways to make sure that the attitudes are appropriate. So we're looking at being positive and accepting, providing a comfortable and colorful setting, making learning fun, helping to eliminate to reduce learning barriers, support both the learners and the trainers, provide the multi-dimensional approaches, making sure you accommodate different learning styles, and provide a group-based learning and present materials visually and verbally when possible. So again, when we go through here then, while the purpose of accelerated learning is to involve the brain's right and left hemispheres, involving different parts of the brain and their functions makes learning more natural. And several principles really for trainers can be implemented during training that do that with, one, the affective state, where eliminating stress or fear, reducing anxiety for people. Beliefs about learning help participants believe they're able to accomplish it and raise their self-efficacy towards learning. Informational networks, providing a connection to new material and how they can connect back to that. Looking at learning cycles, remember that learners are better able to process and retain short learning segments rather than long ones. Multi-sensory input, where learners learn in different ways, so you use that multi-sensory approach. And then making sure that the learning readiness state is there and ensuring that they're ready to learn. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator is one of the most widely used instruments to assess psychological preferences among people. Briggs and her daughter, Myers, based their work on Carl Jung. The instrument is developed to ask people to self-report on their individual preferences. The individual preferences look at extroversion and introversion, where extroverts are aware and rely on their environment for stimulation, where introverts are stimulated by the inner world or inner concepts. Perception, which is looked at as sensing or intuitive. Judgment, which is thinking or feeling. And attitude of judgment, which is judgment or perception. Others have taken and built off of the work of the MBTI. One example of that is Silver and Hanson's Learning Style Inventory. And what they have done is they've taken categories of the MBTI and placed them together. So sensing and thinking, intuitive thinking, sensing feeling, and intuitive feeling, which are STs, NTs, SFs, or NFs, if you're looking at it from the perspective of the MBTI and how they're put together. And what you can do is look how these concepts really impact learners and what they need in a classroom environment. Adult learning rates are very important to take into consideration, and they vary widely. Things like education, background, experience, intelligence, emotional stability, and motivation for achievement all impact how fast and the speed at which adults can learn. And it can impact how quickly or how slowly you need to provide material for them for those processes. And again, other factors you might want to take into consideration are psychological, environment, emotional, sociological, physical, intellectual, experiential, and age. So all of those are things that you need to consider when you're looking at how fast your group is going to be able to learn information. Identifying training and presentation style is also important. A trainer's preference for a particular presentation style is often based on what they've done and what they've experienced. But one of the biggest things is to be able to be flexible, understand what style you have, and then know what your strengths and weaknesses are. And really be self-aware of your strengths and weaknesses and do what you can to make your delivery and training better. So do a better job of delivering training that accommodates all learners. Appreciate the cognitive and affective differences between the trainer and the learner. Appreciate the use of a wider variety of teaching techniques. Better understand learner preferences and be more accepting of differences among people. So again, thank you for going through this session, and there will be a short quiz to follow. Click on the link to complete the short quiz.